So some of you are watching live today, and some of you will be watching this on the when we upload it onto the internet. So welcome, it's great to have you here. If you're on the live webcast, just know that if there's a comment you want to make or response to a question I ask, you can type that into the little chat box. So welcome. My name is Dr. Lisa Sanden, and I am a Montessori teacher, a consultant, and a Montessori presenter. And I'm also a coach, a group leader, and a trainer here at the Wright Foundation for the Realization of Human Potential. I received my master's and my doctoral degrees from the Wright Graduate University. Today we'll be exploring the power of emotions in education. We'll look at what gets in the way of being fully present with the children, fully engaged, and actually completely fulfilled in our work. We'll look at how to identify particular challenges that arise in our relationships with the children, and I'll be giving you some tools to address those challenges. At the Wright Graduate University, one of the immediate things that I discovered was that everything that I was studying really resonated with what I had studied in Montessori. At WGU, I don't have... Thank you. At WGU, we study the 6 core disciplines of developmental theory and practice, Adlerian education and psychology, humanistic and human potential theory and practice, educational theory and practice, existential theory and practice, and research and neuroscience. And with every one of those core disciplines that I was studying, I would say to myself and my professors over and over and over again, this is what Dr. Montessori said, this is what Dr. Montessori observed. So it was really very exciting to me. And one of the key resonances is that at WGU we have the requirement that for any degree you have to demonstrate that you have transformed your life. So you can't actually just learn the material and memorize a bunch of things. You actually have to show that you're doing something with it for yourself and for others. And Dr. Montessori also spoke about the transformation of the adult and expected that we would do whatever it takes to make that happen. So, but really, what did Dr. Montessori mean by the transformation of the adult? I can't really know for sure, but she left us some clues in her writing and her speaking. And she said, in the book Spontaneous Activity in Education, she said, he obtains from them the revelation of himself, and his emotions vibrate with the contact of other souls like his own. So this is our first clue, that she intended us to use our relationship with the children to understand ourselves better, and also as part of our own development and transformation. And Alfred Adler, one of the great thinkers that we study at the Wright Graduate University, also believed and observed that we develop to our fullest potential when we're in relationship with other people. So there's our first clue, is that we learn about ourselves through the children. Montessori also said, we must tear out our most deeply rooted defects. She was not talking here about making incremental improvements in how we present the Montessori materials. She was really talking about a very deep transformation of the personality, something much more meaningful. And she wrote, it is unquestionable that with this method of education, the preparation of the teacher must be made anew, and that the personality and social importance of the instructress will be transformed thereby. She's really talking about the transformation of the personality. And we Montessorians are sometimes, even very often, very, very good students of Montessori. We study, we learn the lessons, we go to refresher courses, but we're not often great students of ourselves. And Dr. Montessori here is really calling us to be great students of ourselves so that we can be increasingly present and increasingly aware of what is needed here and now with any particular child. Frankly, the biggest gift that we can give children is to be ourselves. And this is a little quote from Ram Dass that I love. He says, I can do nothing for you but work on myself. and you can do nothing for me but work on yourself. And Ram Dass is another one of the thinkers that we study at the Wright Graduate University. So part of working on ourselves is understanding and doing what we call reclaim our projections. So projection, it's the act of unconsciously assigning our unwanted motivations, desires, our unwanted defenses to others. And in the case I'm talking about today, those others would be the children. Andy Hargraves, an educational theorist and thinker and researcher, said, "In the absence of emotional understanding, teachers may mistake their feeling for the feeling of the other and interpret their feelings as the feelings of the other." This is essentially projection. Another educational researcher and writer said that teachers carry and transfer and unknown childhood fantasies, dreams, upsets, and fears into their relationships with the children. So in other words, we have these unconscious, unresolved emotions and situations from our childhoods that, and I like to think of this as we have parts of ourselves that we have not yet loved, and these unknowingly interfere in our relationship with the children. These projections prevent us from knowing ourselves, and they prevent us from knowing the children. So let's talk for a minute about early childhood, really the source of our projections. So Wright uses the model and the metaphor of the love sponge to understand this. And Montessorians will be very familiar with this kind of terminology because Dr. Montessori herself said that children from 0 to 6 are in this period of what she called the absorbent mind, meaning that they absorb everything that's coming towards them without any filter. So as a love sponge, the child unconsciously absorbs all impressions, including approval and disapproval of parents and other primary caregivers, and also adopts their limiting beliefs, their thoughts, and their criticisms as his own. So those feelings, states, and ways of being that were accepted in the family are the fully watered parts of the love sponge. So that's the central part of the sponge here, that central column. So for me, it was acceptable to be funny and friendly, to be self-reliant, to be smart, and to be tough. Those were very well accepted in my family. This eventually becomes the adult's false self, that which we present to the world as who I am. I'm Lisa, I'm friendly, funny, smart, and tough. You know, this is really what we show to people. And the parts of ourselves that were not accepted in our families of origin, those parts that are not who I am not, they dry up and they remain undernourished. These are the side columns in the model of the love sponge. So being shy, angry, looking bad, being messy, assertive, dependent. Those are my particular dry areas of the love sponge. They just dry up and they wither away. And these are the parts of self that we either consciously or unconsciously tried to hide from others, but these are also the parts that we tend to project out onto the children in our care. And typically, we don't like it when we see it. So the research on projection in the classroom suggests that taking a deep dive into understanding ourselves better and our responses more fully will diminish the impact of these unresolved issues on our teaching. That it will improve our relationship with ourselves, we'll know ourselves and accept ourselves more fully, and it'll allow us to really bring those unloved, hidden parts of ourselves out into the open so that they can be more fully watered. Ultimately, we'll be less stressed because we won't have these parts of ourselves that we're ashamed of, that we feel we have to hide. And there is evidence that an adult working on their own development, who works with children, has positive impact on classroom outcomes, including testing and grades, even if no emotional intelligence work is taught to the children. So the first step in addressing the impact of projections is to know that you are doing it. So I just would like everybody, just for a minute, on the web and in the room, to just lightly put your hand on your wrist and find out if you have a pulse. I do. So if you have a pulse like I do, then it means that you are projecting at some point or another in your day, maybe even right now. Projection is a very natural, built-in defense mechanism. It was first identified and defined by Sigmund Freud and later really more fleshed out and developed by his daughter Anna Freud. And it's built in so that we don't carry the anxiety of these hidden kind of dark side of ourselves that we don't like and we don't want to see all the time. And it prevents us from that. So I'm going to give you some clues as to how you might know with a given child or a group of children how you are projecting. So some of the things that I'm going to be talking about are things that as teachers we don't typically want to talk about and we may not want to admit to. But in my conversations with teachers all over the country, I am aware that they do these things too. So I know I'm not alone. These are the things that we keep hidden. They're the things that we think make us a bad teacher, maybe even a bad Montessorian. And at times, these are the things that we do that make us think, gee, maybe I shouldn't be in Montessori at all. You know, I've actually had the thought, maybe I should just literally go be a checker at a grocery store because I am just never going to be the kind of person that I'm supposed to be. Anybody else ever think that at times, that you'll just never quite measure up, you'll never really cut the, make the cut? I know it's very common with the people that I've talked to. So the first clue that you're projecting onto a child is when you have heightened emotional reactions. Reactions that are exaggerated or that are stronger than really seem warranted given the situation. So these heightened emotional reactions can include just being simply more hurt or angry or afraid or sad than is really warranted in a particular situation. But it can also include blaming. Blaming a child for how you feel. Oh, if only that person wouldn't come, then I wouldn't feel so anxious. Or blaming a group of children, for example, those, wild, rambunctious 4-year-old boys. They're always up to something, and it makes it really hard for me. So that element of blame can be an indication that you're projecting. Also, hoping that a child would have an occasional sick day. That child who just comes to school no matter what, and your heart sometimes literally just sinks when they walk into the room. So what I'm not saying is that there aren't particular challenges sometimes with a particular child or a particular group of people that may make things challenging in the classroom. But in my experience, when I am that deeply triggered that I wish they wouldn't come, that's an indication that I've got something going on inside of me and that I am likely projecting some dark or hidden aspect of myself that I really don't want to see in front of me. Another clue would be a child that you kind of have to make yourself work with one-on-one, somebody that you tend to avoid, somebody you can't seem to feel close to or tender towards, someone with whom it's difficult to work with, or somebody that you just can't seem to connect with. Another example would be a child who seems to be the scapegoat of the group. That child, everybody seems to blame that child when something goes wrong, even on the days that they're sick and not at school. So you see, scapegoating occurs in large part because of our reaction to that child. And if we are reacting in a heightened way, then the children are catching on to that and they're just following our lead. Another indication that you're projecting is if you have a child that you want to push down, hold back, just woe down, tighten up the reins on that one. So I want you to remember that this is an unconscious mechanism, and at best it's typically pre-conscious, and we don't really know that we're doing it. Sometimes I'll find I have like a little bit of observing ego back here where I'm sort of watching myself in the moment, but it's not like an integrated knowledge where I can actually do something about it. Another indication would be that you're holding, if you have an emotion that you're holding on to, a strong emotion that you're holding on to for longer than a couple of minutes, some child or some situation that you just ruminate over and over and over and over about, or if you're like me, that you find yourself talking out loud in the car on the way home about a situation or a particular child. Sometimes projection can even be an idealized projection. We may be projecting out that self that we haven't yet realized we have those qualities. We are that person. We have those skills. And that can be the child that you've got on a pedestal. And for sure, if you say this is an ideal Montessori child, I would suggest that you're probably projecting something about yourself that you're just not recognizing. So I hope you've gotten the sense that I've done all of these things more than once in my 28 years of teaching. And I have, of course, at times thought that it made me a bad teacher. But I've had people over and over and over tell me, no, you're actually quite good at this. But what I've gotten good at is hiding. I've gotten really good at suppressing those feelings that I thought were not okay, pretending I didn't have them, pretending I'm not doing those things that we just talked about. It's really suppressing those emotions. And yet here is this underlying feeling that I know is happening, and I also know that I am not being my best self with the children. So the work that we do to pretend that we're not having a feeling is called emotional labor. And emotional labor is very, very stressful. And emotional labor, particularly that aspect, one of the qualities of emotional labor is that you begin to suppress what you actually feel and manufacture out of nothing how you think you're supposed to feel. And that has tremendous costs. It leads to burnout. Suppression of your emotions leads to burnout. It leads to increased activation in your cardiovascular system. It is costly to memory. It negatively impacts your experience of positive emotions. You see, you're just suppressing the whole system. You can't really just suppress one emotion, you suppress them all. It increases your blood pressure, and it increases the blood pressure of the people around you. So if you work with children, imagine what that impact is for them. And it has demonstrable social consequences, such as decreased social support. So if you're pretending that you're not, for example, angry with a child, then you're not likely to go seek help or get somebody to really help you understand yourself better. So in other words, how we manage our emotions matters, and it matters a lot. So I just want to sum up projection. We project all the time. And as you can see, I hope it gets in the way of our relationships with the children. It can also prevent us from being fully nourished as teachers. You see, projection acts like a bit of a wormhole into our past, right? We are suddenly right there with an early childhood situation that we haven't yet resolved. So we're not fully present in the here and now. And Dr. Judith Wright, one of the founders and professors of the Wright Graduate University, says nourishment happens in the here and now. So in addition to not being here and now, we won't be nourished by contact with the children if what we're doing is projecting all of those hidden kind of dark parts of ourselves onto them. And in all likelihood, we'll be sort of pushing them away because we don't like what we see. And even if we are suppressing our emotions and faking, so we think we look more like we're supposed to look at school, we actually look like this. And this face is read as a threat by children, by other adults, because you don't know what's really going on. You can tell that it's inauthentic, but it's read as a threat because we know it's not real. So we know we project. We know it gets in the way of our relationships, but it's not easy to address this mechanism. As I said, it is built into the human being, and it's not going to go away. We will actually not stop projecting. And Dr. Montessori didn't provide a roadmap for us, for those of you who are Montessorians. But what we can do is increase our awareness of when we're doing it and do what we refer to as reclaiming our projections. That is coming to love those aspects of self that we haven't yet loved. So I want to tell you a story of a child in my classroom that I think illustrates this point well. I'll call her Susan today. She came to me at about age 3. She was built like a little fire plug, just adorable. And she would enter the class by, she'd open the door, and then she would hold on to that doorknob for 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes, just watching, looking around, waiting to see if it was okay to come in. And from the very first day that she arrived in the classroom, I felt this little kind of prick of what I called then irritation, but it's just a little bit of anger, just a little tiny, but I also felt this kind of down feeling and like a little bit of sadness as I watched her hesitate coming into the room. And over time, when she didn't give up her doorknob, those feelings inside of me grew. And I was aware of them, but I didn't really understand what they meant. Sometimes I was able to just let it go, just let her hold the doorknob, just let it go on until she was ready. But other times I actually felt quite overwhelmed by these feelings that I was having. And it appeared to me that the only relief I could have would be to get her to move away from the door. Those were actually some of the moments that I thought, I'm just not cut out for this work. I actually shouldn't be in Montessori. So eventually I noticed my own pattern. I noticed my own pattern of avoidance. I would make my lesson list that included every child at the beginning of the week, and these were the directions that I wanted to take the children this week. And day after day, she would still be on that list. I would not be able to check her off. And then Friday would come, and oh boy, I better get to Susan. And in retrospect, I can see this, but I wasn't aware of it at the time, I don't think, but I actually was thinking, she's avoiding me. I wonder why. Why is she avoiding me? At one point, I realized part of what was going on, and I talked to my assistant. And I said, look, I don't have a good relationship with this child. That's on me. It's time that I fix that. I'm going to make sure that I spend some good quality time with her and really get to know her. So I did work more with her. I purposefully soothed that little prick of anger and the feeling of sadness that I had. So I just soothed it, calmed it down a little bit. And then I enhanced my feeling of excitement about getting to know her. I enhanced my desire for her to have a good experience at school. So one day, I'm sitting next to her, and I'm sitting on this tiny little chair that's built for a 3-year-old, and she's sitting on a tiny little chair, and I think we're working on letters. I can't exactly remember, but so I'm looking at her like this, and we're just working on this together. And all of a sudden, it just washes over me. I was suddenly aware of my own childhood hesitation, my childhood habit of shyness, how I had been so reluctant to make the first move to make a new friend, really how socially awkward I was. See, this was in the dry part of my love sponge, so I want to show you the love sponge slide again. See, I had come to love the part of me that was somewhat assertive, that could get in front of an audience and speak, that could meet people and walk into a room. But I hadn't really come to love the part of me that was shy, hesitant, didn't know how to really interact with people very well. And of course, becoming aware of that in myself, what was happening inside of myself, and really sort of starting to pour some love and water on those parts of me that I hadn't loved helped me tremendously to warm up to her, to really feel just tender towards her and so much care. And sometimes I still felt sort of sad around her in that recognition that she's going through something that I went through that was painful for me. But I began to approach her more and to feel warmly towards her. I even remembered that at different points in my life, I too was built like a little fire plug, and my mom actually did my hair the exact same way that her hair was done. So awareness is the critical skill, becoming aware of when we're doing it. In fact, Fritz Perls, one of the great human potential thinkers that we study at the Wright Graduate University, said, awareness per se, by and of itself, can be curative. So addressing projection starts with becoming aware of all those different situations that I had mentioned before. Patterns of avoidance, heightened emotions, blaming children, resenting them, wishing they would have a sick day. That's the very first step. See, if we can't see it, we can't change it. And this is one of the things that, as Montessorians, for those of you who are in Montessori, that we can add to our observations. As we're sitting quietly in our chair taking notes, we could be noticing, how do we feel with a particular child? Do they represent some aspect of ourselves that we haven't come to love yet? Or we could talk to our colleagues or our bosses about it without blaming and without complaining, but really having a genuine self-inquiry that could lead to our growth. So there's the first step, awareness. But of course, there's more. Dr. Montessori did not have access to the field of emotional intelligence that we are fortunate enough to have. And emotional intelligence is one of the big keys and tools in addressing projections. Salovey and Mayer, two of the early thinkers in emotional intelligence, define emotional intelligence this way. They say it's the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and actions. So this, emotional intelligence, is the next step in reclaiming projections. Our emotions hold really important clues into where our love sponge is not watered. They hold clues into what we need, to what our deepest yearnings are. They hold clues to what needs we're not meeting in any given moment. And they hold clues into our relationships with the children and what we're not, what's in the way of us having better relationships. Now, our emotional facility is largely determined in early childhood, just like most of the rest of our personality. But because of brain plasticity, with vision, with a plan, with support from people who know what you're doing, with a lot of darned hard work, we actually can shift our emotional facility, which is really what I began to do here at the Wright Foundation. I think it was about 14 years ago. So now I want to introduce you to a model of emotional facility that I've been using in my own work with reclaiming my projections. And this is called the 4 Directions of Emotional Facility, which was created by Dr. Judith Wright, who I mentioned before. She's one of the professors and founders of the Wright Graduate University. So the in direction of emotional facility is being in touch with and aware of what is going on inside of ourselves, and to be able to identify with and understand what's going on inside of others. So, right, this is exactly where I started with Susan, realizing, oh, I've got something happening in here that's not really appropriate to the situation. So we use the 5 primary emotions: fear, hurt, anger, sadness, and joy. And this model is unique in including emotional hurt as a primary emotion. Most models of emotional intelligence don't include emotional hurt as a primary emotion. Out is the free flow of responsible expression of what you actually feel so that emotions can complete themselves. This brings us into greater rapport with ourselves and with others. So this is not dumping our feelings on the children. And it's not making them pay for our childhood challenges or pain. What this is really finding an ally to express to. It can be getting a coach to work with you, as I have done. It can be using our colleagues or boss, again, not to complain or dump, but to really have important self-inquiry and to try to understand ourselves more fully. And again, this model does differ from other models as it includes full expression to completion of the emotion. And we believe that full expression leads to greater intimacy. Most emotional intelligence models use a model of sort of dampening or calming your emotions in order to gain greater rapport. So that's very different in this model. Up is to upregulate, to get your motor running faster when it is slow, and also to enhance our awareness of positive affect, as well as the intensity of positive affect. So we all know children who, the child sitting in their chair like this where they just need to get their motor running a little faster, but don't we need to get our motor running faster sometimes? For example, when that child who we wish would have a sick day comes in and our motor sort of slows down, it's our job to get our motor running faster. And it can also be what I did with Susan and really cultivating that feeling of excitement about getting to know her better. Down, the down direction of emotional facility is down-regulating, calming, and soothing oneself or containing emotions as necessary. Again, this is very different than emotional suppression. This is actually soothing yourself so that you can stay with the feeling instead of what I would typically do, which would be to put chocolate on top of my feelings. Or going for a run to get away from my feelings. And this is really being aware, really letting yourself feel them, because chocolate just gets in the way. Chocolate just dampens us, and then we can't get the information that we need from our feelings. It can include reappraisal. Down-regulating can include doing the work that we need to do to understand ourselves better. So now we're going to do a short exercise in emotional awareness that Dr. Judith Wright does at the More Life Training Weekend. So I'm stealing this from her. So I'd like you to get in just a comfortable seated posture. Take things off your lap if you have things in your lap. Feel your body in the chair and just make yourself comfortable. And when you're ready, and if you feel comfortable doing so, just gently close your eyes. And take a deep breath. Another deep breath. And now I want you to go back in time and find a moment that you were very much afraid. Go back to a situation that you felt afraid and see if you can really put yourself into that moment. And when you put yourself into that moment that you felt very afraid, start to notice what's happening in your body. Notice what your thought patterns are. Notice what is happening in the muscles of your face, your eyes, your mouth, your jaw. Notice if your breathing is changed, your heart rate. And feel anything happening in your gut, your stomach, your hands. Really pay attention to what happens in your body when you are afraid. And know this is what it feels like when I'm afraid. And now take another deep breath. And find a time, let that one go, let the fear go, and find a time that you felt emotionally hurt. Really put yourself into a situation where you felt emotionally hurt. And really let yourself feel what that feels like in your body. So notice what's happening around your eyes, your mouth, what your thoughts are. Notice your throat and your jaw, heart rate, breathing patterns. What's happening with your posture and how you're sitting in that chair. Really pay attention to your gut, your arms, your legs. What happens in your body when you are hurt? Just know this is what it feels like when you feel hurt. And now take a deep breath and let that go. And find a time in your life that you felt angry. Really put yourself into that moment where you felt angry. And pay attention to what's happening in your body. Notice your thoughts. Notice what's happening around your face, your jaw, your throat. When you're angry, notice what you feel in your chest, your stomach, down inside your guts. What does it feel like in your arms and legs? What is your posture doing? Really pay attention to what you feel like when you're angry. Take another deep breath and let that one go. And now find a time in your life that you felt sad. Really notice when you felt sad. Put yourself right back in that situation where you were sad. And pay attention to yourself. Notice yourself. What's happening now in that sadness in your face, your eyes, around your mouth? Notice your thought patterns, if there's something happening in your throat, your breath, your posture, your heart rate. Notice any feeling you have in your diaphragm, your stomach, your guts, what's happening in your arms, your hands. Really give yourself some attention and pay attention to what it feels like to be sad. And know this is what I feel like when I'm sad. And now, take another deep breath and let that go. And go back in time to another time where you felt joy, where you felt the most joy. And notice yourself in that joy. Really put yourself back there. And notice your thoughts. Notice what's happening around your face, your jaw, your mouth, and your eyes. Is there anything happening, any sensation in your throat, your heart rate, your posture? What's happening in your chest, your stomach? Really pay attention to what joy feels like. Know this is what I feel like when I feel joy. So now take another deep breath and then let that one go. And take one more deep breath. And after that breath, gently rub your hands together so they're warm and cup them gently over your eyes so that if you closed your eyes, you're opening them into your dark hands rather than into the brightness of the room. And then when you're ready, just take your hands down and be back here in the room. So people have a lot of different reactions to that exercise. Sometimes people have a particular emotion that they can really feel and others that they can't. Sometimes people have one emotion that they can't find at all. They can't find any experience of that emotion. And other people have an experience of, I can't find any. I just took a little nap and that felt great. And all those are very common reactions to this exercise. See, sometimes we can't name the feeling right off the bat, but if we pay attention to what's happening in our body, that can give us a clue to what our emotion is, which then gives us a clue as to our projections. So I'm going to finish today with an experience that I had with a couple more 3-year-old children that I hope will illustrate the power of emotions and how to use this model of emotional facility to recognize and address projections. So some years ago, I had 2 brand new 3-year-old children in my class, and they found each other immediately. And they also found this sweet little bench that they would sit on together. And no matter what I showed them, no matter how many lessons they got, they always went right back to the bench. And sometimes they would use something for a couple of minutes, but then they would quick put it back on the shelf and rush back to the bench to be together. And inside, even though I've gotten pretty good at being calm on the outside, inside I was boiling after a couple of weeks. I was just burning up. I was so mad. Why would children with such a banquet of beautiful materials have so little interest and just want to be together? I couldn't fathom it. And I knew that my anger was heightened beyond what was reasonable. So, right, this is that in aspect of emotional facility. I was aware of my feeling. I even had thoughts of wanting to destroy the bench. I had thoughts of removing it or finding some other use for it. But I also knew that from all of my training in Montessori and all of my classes at the Wright Foundation, that I was not going to move it until I fully understood what was going on with me about that bench. I mean, really think about it. They're two lovely little 3-year-old children sitting enjoying each other's company on a bench. So I think that's a clue to the fact that I was projecting. They were driving me over the edge. So I realized I was probably projecting, so I continued to really soothe myself, that down-regulating, that down direction of emotional facility, so that I didn't dump my anger on them, and so that I could watch what was happening and try to understand what was going on over here. And for literally, it was a couple of months, I just couldn't put my finger on it. And so the bench sat there, and so did the children. And one day I thought I had it figured out. I kind of had this light bulb go off. And then I approached my coach, who at that time was Dr. Bob Wright, another one of the professors at the Wright Graduate University, and I expressed what was going on, and I expressed my feelings about it. And so this is the out direction of emotional facility. And I explained everything, and he looked at me, and I remember his face. He looked at me so warmly, and he basically said, no, you have always wanted to be accepted for just being yourself without having to perform. They have what you have always wanted. And that struck me so deeply, the tears began rolling down my cheeks, and they're welling even as I speak about it now. And that day, Dr. Bob gave me an assignment, which is one of the technologies that we use at the Wright Foundation. And he said, sit on the bench with them. Just be there with them. And he said, sometimes sit on the bench alone and see who comes to sit with you. You see, I had learned in my family that aloneness was the watered part of my love sponge. Independence, be alone. You don't need anybody. We were really, in my family, like an archipelago. We were all these islands that were sort of associated, but that never really touched or connected deeply. So that part of my love sponge was very, very, very dry, the part that wanted to belong. And I'd learned to deny it and reject it, and in fact, project out that it wasn't okay for anybody else to want that either. So after that day, my anger about the bench dissipated. And sometimes those two children sat on the bench, and sometimes they didn't. But I was no longer boiling inside, and I have actually learned to use them and other children connecting as a role model for me in my life to be sure that I'm having the kind of connection that those two children want and wanted and went after. So today we've talked about projections, about heightened emotions and clues that you are projecting. And we've talked about the model of 4 directions of emotional facility. And with these examples, I hope you can get a glimpse of the power and the importance of all emotions in education, not just for the children, but really for ourselves. And it's really what I think Dr. Montessori meant by her command to transform yourselves. Thank you for coming.